My name is Albert, and welcome to Unknown Facts. Alright, let's talk about movies, specifically horror movies. You know the ones. They keep you up at night, make you double-check the locks, maybe even make you question that weird creak you just heard. But what if I told you that sometimes the scariest part of the movie isn't what's on screen, but the chilling reality that inspired it? That the monsters aren't just figments of a writer's imagination. So grab your popcorn, maybe a security blanket, and get ready. Before we jump in, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, it really helps the channel out and ensures you won't miss our next dive into the unknown. Now let's get into it. Today we're pulling back the curtain on some of Hollywood's most iconic horror films to uncover the bone-chilling true stories that started it all. We're diving deep into the facts, the legends, and the unnerving details that prove sometimes real life is far more frightening than fiction. We have to start with a classic, a film that absolutely terrified audiences in 1973, The Exorcist. But the story's roots aren't in Hollywood. They're in a 1949 Washington Post article. The film was based on the real-life exorcism of a 14-year-old boy. He was known by the pseudonym Roland Doe, sometimes Robbie Mannheim, to protect his identity. This wasn't some quiet behind-closed-doors affair. It was a media sensation. Furniture would move on its own. Objects would levitate and fly across the room when the boy was near. Scratches would appear on the boy's body, forming words. He would speak in a guttural voice, uttering phrases in Latin, a language he had never studied. Desperate, the family sought help from the Catholic Church, which authorized an exorcism. The rite was performed over 30 times across several weeks, led by Jesuit priests. They documented a boy who would spit, curse, react violently to sacred objects, holy water and crucifixes, and whose mattress would shake violently. Priests reported the words hell and evil appearing on his skin in raised red welts. Whether you're a skeptic or believer, the priests' accounts became the foundation for one of the most terrifying films ever made. Let's talk about The Conjuring. In 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved their 5 daughters into a historic farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. It was their dream home, but quickly devolved into a decade-long nightmare. Brooms would go missing and later move on their own. The girls saw misty figures that vanished when looked at directly. Carolyn woke with unexplained bruises, puncture marks. She was slapped, pinched, and sometimes thrown by unseen forces. Their toys moved. The children heard whispers in the dark, telling them, "Get out." They identified a spirit as Bathsheba Sherman, rumored to have lived on the property in the 1800s. The family reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine sensed a dark presence right away. The Warrens investigated and held a séance. The family endured the haunting for nearly another decade before finally moving away. The villain of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, is an icon of cinematic horror. It seems too grotesque to be real, right? But Leatherface, Norman Bates, and Buffalo Bill were inspired by Ed Gein. In 1957, police searched Ed Gein's farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and what they found shocked the nation. They found bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, clothing fashioned from skin, evidence more macabre than fiction. Unlike Leatherface, Gein wasn't part of a cannibalistic family and he didn't use a chainsaw. After his domineering mother's death, Gein began exhuming corpses of women he thought resembled her. He confessed to 2 murders, but most of his crimes were grave robbing and grotesque craftsmanship. Gein's macabre crafts directly inspired films and characters, a grim reminder that real people sometimes commit truly bizarre crimes. He became a press sensation, the Plainfield Ghoul, and his story fed Hollywood's nightmares. The truth is often more complicated than the legend. Filmmakers borrow details and amplify them. Coming up next, hauntings that tore families apart and crimes that inspired some of the darkest films of modern times. The Amityville Horror is one of the most famous and controversial haunting stories. In 1975, the Lutz family moved into the Dutch Colonial, where Ronald DeFeo Jr. had murdered his family 13 months earlier. They fled in terror 28 days later, claiming paranormal forces forced them out. The book and film amplified details: green slime in walls and a demonic pig named Jody. One persistent and bizarre detail was a plague of flies. Even in winter, one sewing room was swarmed. No matter how many times they swatted them, the flies always returned. They also discovered a hidden red room, 4 by 5 feet, painted entirely red, not on the blueprints. Their dog refused to go near the basement. The DeFeos had no knowledge of this room. The story is steeped in controversy. Critics point to inconsistencies and possible fabrication for money. But the Lutzes, until their deaths, never wavered from their story. Whether real or a hoax, the small details, winter flies and a hidden red room, keep this case debated. The Haunting in Connecticut tells of the Snedeker family who moved closer to their son's treatment. They discovered mortuary tools, scalpels, blood drains, a coffin hoist, remnants of its past as a funeral home. Their eldest son had terrifying visions, a gaunt man, and an entity with backward feet. The family reported being physically assaulted, objects shaking, and even smells of decay. Desperate, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens documented the case and called in priests. Priests performed an exorcism the Warrens said cleansed the house. Skeptics debate validity, but the Snedekers insist their 2-year ordeal was real. David Fincher's Zodiac, 2007, is a tense procedural about one of America's most infamous killers. The Zodiac terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s, claiming at least 5 victims. He taunted police and the press with handwritten letters and cryptograms, daring the world to decode them. Of the 4 ciphers he sent, only 2 were definitively solved. A schoolteacher and his wife cracked the 408 in 1969. The infamous 340 cipher remained unsolved for 51 years, finally cracked in 2020 by a team of private citizens. But the decoded message didn't give his name, only more taunting lines. The Zodiac wanted fame. His letters and ciphers made him a global sensation and frustrated investigators. Despite major investigations and suspects like Arthur Lee Allen, the case remains officially unsolved. Wolf Creek, 2005, taps into a primal fear, stranded in the outback. Mick Taylor was inspired primarily by Ivan Milat, the backpacker murderer who killed at least 7 people in Belanglo Forest. The film also borrows elements from Bradley John Murdoch's attack on Peter Falconio, a couple targeted on a remote highway. The Strangers is terrifyingly plausible. Director Brian Bertino cited a childhood memory where a stranger asked, "Is Tamara home?" He also drew from the unsolved Ketty Cabin murders, a brutal crime in Cabin 28 that remains mysterious. The randomness and brutality of Ketty, combined with that childhood knock on the door, created the film's suffocating dread. Open Water, 2003, is a primal fear nightmare. It's based on Tom and Eileen Lonergan, experienced divers abandoned by their tourboat in 1998. A diver's slate was later found reading, "We have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef, please help us." Their fate remains a mystery, dehydration, drowning, or sharks. But the real horror is how a simple mistake became fatal. This one is really tough. Sylvia Likens, 16, was left in the care of Gertrude Banaszewski in 1965. What followed was 3 months of torture. She was beaten, starved, burned with cigarettes, and forced to endure humiliations while neighborhood kids watched. Gertrude and several others were convicted. The case is a horrifying reminder of the extremes of cruelty and bystander apathy. 12 iconic horror movies, with roots planted firmly in the terrifying soil of reality. These stories remind us that behind every film are real events, real people, and real pain. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and diving into these dark histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, please hit like and subscribe to Unknown Facts. What movie's true story shocks you the most? Let me know in the comments. Stay curious, stay safe, and maybe leave a light on tonight.